take about 10 seconds and then we'll be live streaming.
Just let me know, ma'am.
And there we go. We are live streaming now.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the March 17th, 2022 meeting of the Community Transportation Advisory Committee. As always, we open up our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm not going to ask everybody necessarily to stand, but stand if you can and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the
of the United States of America
and to
to
the republic
for which it stands,
one
nation, under God, indivisible,
with
liberty
and
justice for all.
Thank you. Nice seeing our committee getting back together and a lot of familiar faces. Do we need to continue the conversation of virtual meetings? And I guess that's a question to Janice and Ken. It's on the agenda. If not,
I believe that's just a statement we put there to let people know how we're doing things. I don't think it's anything that we really need to make any formal announcements about.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to call the roll, Janice?
Absolutely. Town of Ashland, Chair Martin. Do that every time.
Present.
Mr. Root.
Present.
Chesterfield County, Ms. Beals. Ms. Jordan. Mr. Richwine. Goochland County, Mr. Basham. Hanover County, Mr. Rasnick.
Here.
Thank you. Henrico County, Ms. Lancaster.
Here.
New Kent County, Vice Chair Guthrie. I just received an email from her that she needs the link again. As soon as I've finished with the roll call, I'll send her that link. Do we have Mr. Moyer? Powhatan County, Mr. Powers. City of Richmond, Ms. Erickson. Mr. Hill. Chamber RVA, Mr. Easter. Mr. Mayman. NAACP, Mr. Minor. Mr. Johnson. League of Women Voters, Ms. Weisiger.
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Rosenblum. RABA, Mr. Burnley.
Here.
Thank you. Virginia Association of Railway Patrons, Mr. Testerman.
Here.
Thank you. Virginia Conservation Network, Mr. Gordon. I believe that Mr. Gordon is with us, but is not yet moved over as panelist, but I will indicate that he is present. Mr. Fisher.
Present.
Thank you. VCU, Mr. Leonard.
I'm here and I would like to introduce Jesse Mcclelland as the alternate for VCU. He works in our Office of Parking and Transportation Services. Welcome, Jesse.
Good afternoon. Thank you, John.
Mr. Chair, that concludes the roll call and we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Firestone. We move on to administration. Are there any amendments to the meeting agenda that was sent out in advance? Does anyone want to make any additions or changes to our agenda for the day? Seeing none and not hearing from the chat, we'll assume that our meeting agenda is closed. We now need to approve the January 2022 CTAC meeting minutes. Are there any corrections, additions?
I did not see where I was mentioned in the meeting, which did in fact take place as the new alternate for Ashland.
Thank you, Don. That was Don Root, the alternate for Ashland. And we had noticed, being a proactive person as Don is, noticed that he was neither listed as alternate nor attended, both of which he did.
Of that.
I'm sure you did, Janice. Are there any other amendments, changes to our minutes? If not, I will hear a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Second?
A second.
Oh, that was a tie between Ms. Lancaster and Mr. Rasnick. You two fight it out. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you so very much. We now move into our open public comment, which is a time that any of the non-committee members have an opportunity to come forward. If you're an individual, please state your name and jurisdiction, and you have 3 minutes. And if you're speaking for an organization, tell us what organization, and also you have 5 minutes. I see none. Ms. Firestone, are there any out on chat?
No, we do have Mr. Johnson, who is having some difficulty coming over as a panelist, but I'm working on that. Ms. Guthrie just arrived, but we don't have anybody attending who's indicated a wish, any visitors who've indicated a wish to speak.
Okay, thank you. Hearing none, I will close the open public comment. CTAC Chairman's report, I will defer to later in the agenda to Lisa Guthrie, who is heading up our CTAC membership committee. We had a very, very good committee meeting prior to this meeting, and I'll defer on to that. So I guess it is now our TPO updates, and the baton is passed on to Mr. Parsons. Chet?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to really focus our update on the current work efforts. And that is, there was a link and information included in your agenda. Obviously, the focus of today's meeting, the main focus is to talk about the Regional Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. So I'm not going to focus there. I did want to let you all know that we are, this is typically a busy time of year for the TPO. Due to all of our grant programs that we monitor and administer. And that's no exception to this year. We have a STBG and CMAQ sub-allocation period right now for fiscal year 23 to 28. And basically that means we've got 2 different types of grants for transportation projects that are competitive. We've had from our eligible participants, mainly our local jurisdictions, we had 34 new or rescope projects submitted for funding with over $207 million requested. 9 existing projects were also submitted requesting additional funding that have received funding in the past. So we are now coming up with our final draft allocations plan. Obviously, not all of those 34 projects are going to be able to be funded, but we've done competitive scoring based on the possible impacts that the projects will have on the transportation network, and we expect to have that back for final authority or final TPO approval in the next month or 2. The other item I wanted to raise was that the Central Virginia Transportation Authority is undergoing a very similar process right now in terms of looking at possible projects that might receive funding from the CVTA. So we're broadening our ability to leverage dollars all across the region from all of these different sources. The CVTA is the latest and the newest, but we have I believe there were 33 projects that were applied for CVTA funding that met eligibility requirements that have been established by the authority. That also is going through a competitive scoring and ranking process, looking at cost benefit as the ultimate guide to provide a recommendation back to the full authority. And that authority will then have the ability to make their decision with input from the scoring, but not exclusive to the scoring. So obviously we're looking forward to that process and spelling out the the projects that will receive regional funds for the next 6-year period. That's going to be an ongoing thing that the CBTA does every year. It's just this is a little bit more exciting right now because it's the first time we've done it. So it's a learning process for everybody, and we're excited about being part of it. And staff is fully supportive on the technical side for the work that the authority is doing. I think that the only other thing to raise is that we're actively monitoring the budget process that's ongoing with the state. And I know many of you here are actually better informed than I am on a lot of those proceedings. So thank you for your information as you've been able to pass it along. We do expect reduced amounts dedicated to the fall line from what we originally expected. So through each of the different organizations, TPO to CBTA to Plan RVA, we're looking at trying to come up with options for how to best allocate funds and when to make sure the fall line continues to move forward. Mr. Chair, I see a couple raised hands. I'm happy to stop my report and take any questions.
Okay, John Easter is the first one that I see on my screen. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chat, can you just talk a little bit about how the process is working with the, somewhat redundant process for the CVTA and the TPO? I mean, I know a lot of thought was put into that and there were concerns about it, but now that you're in the middle of the sausage making, how does that seem to be working?
Sure. Yeah, I think that the big difference, honestly, is the amount of funding available. Through the TPO, we've got the RSTP and CMAQ funds. That's a lot smaller of a pot. So we've been very deliberate in working with the member jurisdictions about what projects they might want to apply for from those funds, as opposed to the bigger regional pot that is available through the CVTA. There's guidelines for each of those programs that kind of spell out what projects are eligible, which aren't. So we've been on top of that as the projects were applied for, and now as we score and rank them. So I think the ultimate goal is, especially this year, is to spread the funds around as much as possible between all these different projects, regardless of the program, so that they score better in smart scale. I think the focus right now is being able to leverage dollars, whether it's RSTP money or CVTA money. We don't really care as a region. It's just put some funds on the project so that we get a better score and hopefully receive additional state support. The name of the game right now is to score better so we can get funds no matter where the money is coming from.
That's great. Thanks, Chet.
Champ, I see your hand is raised.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So Chet, for some reason, I thought we 4 or 5 years ago were in compliance with the congestion mitigation and we were losing those funds. Am I mistaken? And if so, how much are being allocated this year?
Oh, Champ, I wish you didn't ask me that. So the legal ramifications are, yes, we are not in violation of the air quality regulations, but there is a legal matter. There was a lawsuit that still applies to our region. So that's the reference to continue to make the CMAQ funds available. So yeah, we're essentially seeing the benefits of being in a poor region without being in a poor air quality region. So we're gonna accept those funds as long as they're available. It doesn't spread across the entire region. There's only a handful of the localities among the 9 that are eligible. So,
but if I'm not mistaken, that used to be the number 28 million sticks in my head. Are we still talking about that level of funding?
I don't believe it's that high anymore, but I can get that and send it back to everybody if you'd like to know.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Chet? Thank you, Chet. Do appreciate it. Great report from you. Moving on to new business, our focus today is going to be basically one presentation about the bike ped RVA 2045 plans. and it'll be led by our good friends, Barbara Jaycox, Phil Riggin, and Dan Mata. Barbara, since you're referred to first, I'll let you take it over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. And we were in Ashland on Tuesday night, so we waved to you, but it was really good to see the new town hall, the town chambers. Enjoyed our visit. I'm happy to take this to our team for part of the presentation, and we're going to start with Dan Motto, and then I'm going to fill in on some of the big ideas, and Phil Riggin is going to help us walk around and look a little closer at what we have on our website, and also the mapping, all the GIS mapping that has been done, just so you can focus in on some areas a little closer up. But it's good to see so many of you that have been involved in the Bike Ped Steering Committee, several of you, as well as those that we've talked to throughout the course of this 2 years in this companion effort to the Connect RVA 2045. But I'm going to let Dan go through the beginning, and I'll pick up from him. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, so Barb mentioned this has been a long time effort. Everybody here at Plan RVA has had a hand in developing this plan, but Barb, myself, and Phil Riggin have been the primary team members that have been developing this particular plan. So just wanted to give a quick introduction to this. This actually came out of a Ashland Complete Streets pilot program that was in 2019, and was selected as a project that needed to be updated for the our 2004 plan that was the last updated regional bicycle and pedestrian plan. So just a little intro there. So today we're just going to give a high-level overview of Bike Ped RVA 2045 and touch on some of the main points. I know some of you have already seen this similar presentation, so you might get a little refresher course, but just wanted to give a brief description of the plan, an introduction to guiding principles, vision, and goals, and give you a look at the big 6 ideas that will help reframe priorities in our region and hopefully plant the seeds for a more sustainable future. And finally, how you can be involved and how the public has been involved so far since the beginning of this public engagement period. So to set the stage, I mentioned that our last regional bicycle and pedestrian plan was completed in 2004. So we're ripe for a reevaluation of the active transportation environment in our region, both the identifying the progress and the setbacks. As I mentioned, in 2019, we had a Ashland pilot program for complete streets, and that same year, a steering committee was established to guide the process and be a representative voice for different parts of our region as we updated the previous 2004 plan. Improving safety was the primary call to action that was identified at the start of this process, though a recognition of existing urgent needs around equity and climate guided the process as well. After Connect RVA 2045, our long-range transportation plan that was adopted last year, we received some public input about how we need to, that highlighted the need for a shift in transportation priorities in our region, specifically safe streets for all. And we attempted to incorporate all of this into this current plan, but we still need to hear from the public and you and your partners to make this plan the best plan possible for our region going forward. So before going any further, let's just define what Bike Ped RVA 2045 is. It is not a ranking of priority projects focused on any one jurisdiction or a finite plan that stops growing upon adoption. It is, however, a comprehensive regional framework that is a companion plan to Connect RVA 2045 and a collection of best management practices. But above all, it is a recognition that all people must have a viable means for travel for everyday life needs. So guiding principles were developed from working within the framework of Connect RVA 2045 and approved by the Bike Ped RVA Steering Committee. And these 6 guiding principles are equity, choice, completion of active networks, last mile transit, context sensitive design, and safe multimodalism. Today, we're just going to focus on one of these principles, equity in transportation, using language from United States Department of Transportation, explanation of transportation equity, just so we're all on the same page with a shared understanding. So they explain that equity from a transportation perspective means seeking fairness in mobility and accessibility with the goal of impartiality. It is about the facilitation of social and economic opportunities, but more plainly, it is about providing every person with access so they can fully participate in society. So these guiding principles informed our vision, which was adopted by our steering committee, and states that we aim to provide mobility for people of all ages and abilities through a safe, continuous, recognizable, and intuitive pedestrian and bicycle network. We aim to make walking, biking, and rolling a safe travel mode that is well integrated into our plans for the future of our region. Together with the guiding principles and vision helped us inform these following goals, and these in turn in the draft plan itself highlight more specific goals like prioritizing active transportation access to jobs and community services, zero cyclist and pedestrian fatalities, and overall increasing mode choice for everyone. So these guiding principles, vision, and goals in turn helped Plan RVA staff and the Bike Ped RVA Steering Committee develop 6 big ideas for the region. And Barb will give you a brief overview of the 6 big ideas.
Thank you, Dan. These 6 big ideas came after, not only do they follow those guiding principles, vision, goals, and objectives, which we spent a lot of time with the steering committee defining, and also informed by public input through the Connect RVA planning process. But we also emerged from that, realizing all the planning factors that we needed to look at, and layers of data that are really apparent in the GIS story map that constitutes our website for the Bike Ped RVA plan. And we'll walk through a little bit of that and how to navigate it, because we want to make sure that you are aware of all of the resources that we're going to keep actively alive, that will really make this plan not one we put on the shelf. But from this stems 6 big ideas. The city of Richmond and their Richmond 300 talks about 6 moves. We're talking about the same kind of idea. These are the first priorities, the framework that really guides the approach that we take to active transportation in the region. So forming the very first big idea is we are building on the network that's being created for regional shared use paths. And that being, of course, the Virginia Capitol Trail that extends from Jamestown to Richmond, and the formation of the exciting Fall Line Trail from Ashland to Petersburg. Together, they make up almost 95 miles of safe, interconnected trails that give you uninterruptible kind of activity opportunities on non-motorized travel. Next slide. We can start to see how it's used. So this, of course, being a piece of, you could see the wide paved nature of the Capitol Trail and how it could be used for all sorts of non-motorized travel. I think we've recognized the differences in the connections between the 2 different trails. Virginia Capitol Trail goes out more into the rural hinterlands, whereas the Fall Line will offer great opportunities for shorter trips, active transportation to schools, into libraries, into colleges, into jobs, back into the neighborhoods. And we're really excited about working on spur networks that connect back into the community. So next big idea, of course, is we've talked a lot about equity. We want to prioritize, make these our first, the first neighbors and residents and employers that we address with some of these spur networks or networks that tie to the regional network. And you can see in the dashed green the areas that we've defined through our Connect RVA process as equity emphasis areas. These are areas where the concentration of low to moderate income residents, minority residents, elderly, those with disabilities, and most importantly, those with fewer car availability, zero car households. We think those are key to, identifying those most vulnerable and needing access to transit, and through active transportation, that access to transit and to their jobs and to everyday life. Next slide. And that just starts to show, some of the areas, East End, South Side, throughout our region that are a focus of, the first priority. We need to work with them first. If we can address their needs, then we'll be serving a lot of the purposes of this plan. The third big idea is to establish higher standards for active transportation infrastructure within the region. We find lots of different applications. Of course, we need to be context sensitive. What works in the city of Richmond is not going to be the same in Powhatan. We recognize that, Powhatan and Goochland Courthouse have different, different connection infrastructure needs than the city of Richmond. But those are still important. We need to make sure people can get around within those areas of those more rural communities, but also to adopt some common understanding of what are the best standards for the infrastructure. And we're carrying that out through the Complete Streets toolbox that will keep continually updated so that reference can be made to some of those best practices. And here, of course, is the beginning of the fall line or the end of the fall line, whichever way you want to look at it, whether you're going north to south or the opposite direction. This is the Ashland Boardwalk that begins the fall line in the north. Higher standards, paved, wide, safety, is a primary consideration. Yes, next big idea is to focus on connections from the neighborhoods to transit. We have lots of sidewalk needs. We have lots of bike lanes that need to be completed. We have lots of ADA standards that need to be addressed. And that we're acknowledging our first priorities, making sure the first mile, last mile to transit accommodates those on foot, in wheelchairs, or on bikes. That in companion effort with any kind of transit work that is being done. And what we're finding, of course, when you extend transit, a good 50% of the cost even is just the supporting infrastructure to make those accommodations possible for the riders. Next slide. And this just shows an example of a better standard for a bus stop. And I know that's being addressed by a lot of effort with many of our partners, is what are the priority bus stops that need to be outfitted with shelters, with benches, and the pavement services that that are suitable for everyone. Next slide. Big idea number 5. This is all just a representative layer of data that is in our story map. You can peel away the layers and look at individual lines, but what we want to focus on is making our streets complete. We have, some 80% of our streets, the road system in the region is our local low volume, relatively low speed streets. So how can we make them more useful for everybody? And how can we connect them, therefore, to those resources that can get them to a destination that goes beyond their neighborhood? So extending them, like we're making connections between neighborhoods, like this example at Chesterfield, where 2 cul-de-sac neighborhoods were zipped up or joined together with just a little bridge over a drainage area, and sent them, so they could communicate and network between each other. And big idea number 6, one thing that we've really focused on is talking to our localities and how they're implementing the plan and implementing within their own jurisdictions. And Chesterfield and Henrico and others in particular working really closely with the development community, making sure that through the site plan process, is conducive to working with the development community to put in active transportation features, and that are in conformance with a larger plan, so that we don't have discontinuous pieces of network that don't tie into anything. And this being one good example of everything that's happening up Route 1, Virginia Center Commons, Green City with Henrico, and the potential connection, Woodman Road that you can see to the north there, the connection that will be made by virtue of a larger development, residential development that's happening on Woodman Road, and that will extend, into Virginia Center Commons area, and also connect to the fall line. So it's a real plus to have the fall line stimulating some of those kinds of decisions for development. And also to the south with Green City, the plans are for Scott Road to be retired as a access by vehicular traffic, but more of a bike ped kind of connection over the long term to Green City. Similar projects are happening within the region in every locality where they're working with the development community. And also with developers to consider, in an urban situation, where are people going to store their bike if they are living in this apartment complex? Where can they store it safely? So just an example of an opportunity to be thinking more proactively in advance. And as I had mentioned, we spent a lot of time with our localities talking about implementation, because they really will be the implementers. We can help with funding sources. I saw an earlier question on funding streams. We can help with setting priorities that meet the local needs, as well as our regional objectives and goals. But they're the ones, the localities are the ones that are in the trenches and actually implementing. So we have a lot of focus in the draft plan on those opportunities for them to be working, and what are the best practices through their comprehensive plans, or small area plans, corridor studies, working with GRTC on transit extensions that tie into the larger picture, site plan review processes. There's just a whole host of tools that are already available to localities, and they're actively using them in the region. So we want to build on that and celebrate the work that they're doing, to just add a layer of regionalism that can then also can help, with funding for their projects and our projects that we're supporting, and provide best practice design guidance, opportunities for regional partnerships that can make us work effectively together, cross-jurisdictional lines to make sure one meets the other with their plans and that there aren't any disconnects. And we've had a lot of conversation about public awareness and safety, not only teaching motorists how to comply, but bikes themselves, pedestrians, all of that, I think is a big step that can be taken through our active transportation work group, which is going to be the force that helps us keep this refreshed and the draft not on the shelf, but keeps it moving forward through all the resources on the website. So now I think we might want to move to questions, a little bit of question, because I saw some pop up in the chat. Make sure we address those, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dan and Phil, mostly to show you what we have on the website, see the resources, navigate quickly, and then you can help us, direct us areas that you might want to look at in more detail.
Barb, do you want to start with Lisa Guthrie?
Yes, I'm just pulling up the.
Yeah, she said she wanted to hear more about
the various streams of funding that are going to the Fall Line Trail. And if Chet is still in here, I'll also get him to chime in. But of course, the CVTA is in large measure, setting aside money, funding up front for a lot of the segments of the Fall Line Trail. And that is matched and also every effort of, through other sources, that the localities, are either through, the TA program, or CMAC or RSTP. So that is, that's the beauty of CVTA, is it's enabling us to take some advanced steps, and also, combine the different sources of funds to make them each more competitive and more viable. Chet, do you have anything you would like to add? If he's still here.
Barbara, it's Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
Thank you for.
Sorry, I can't see everybody. I'm not sure who's here.
I knew that there was, I think Congressman Mcclelland mentioned that there was some federal funding that was to be applied at the southern end of the Fall Line. I just didn't know, of course, the state budget is still out. There are some allocations in there that vary from House to Senate. So anyway, I just wondered, in addition to what we know that CVTA has allocated, it sounded like it had risen to a priority with these other governmental entities as well. So I just wanted to see how that is all coming together and measuring up. Yeah,
that is my understanding too, that some of those quote earmarks through the infrastructure bill are coming to fruition. The one from Congressman Mcclelland. Definitely. And there might be others that maybe John Easter has the word on how much and where it's from. But yes, that's what's wonderful about having sources such as that, to be able to leverage more. And let's see, other questions?
Barb, this is Upton Martin.
Okay.
we chatted at the last meeting about what we have, Ann and I have observed and a little bit of our travels about motorized vehicles such as skateboards and the little scooters, things like that, that are becoming more and more popular for transportation and relatively long transportation. Most of the cities that we were in, they were mixed in with the bicycles and they were mixed in with the traffic on regular roads. Is there any discussion about the utilization of the bike ped routes that are like the Capitol Trail and the Fall Line Trail, about accommodating that type of transportation and keeping those away from the vehicle transportation?
Right. Well, we have certainly looked at e-bikes and those forms of aid assist right here, where you can see one featured. And I'm going to defer also to Dan, who's spent a little more time looking at other forms of assisted kind of transportation on the two regional trails in particular. And Dan, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't feel that it's not, there are certain standards or different levels of, of those types of vehicles. And I know some, the higher level type of, they're talked about not being on sidewalks or on those regional trails. Dan, do you have anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just really quickly, there are certain considerations you need to take into account, but for the most part, e-bikes and e-scooters and the like are tremendous opportunity, especially for regional travel. Personally, that's how I get to work when I come into the office, is on my e-bike, and I would not be able to do that without assist. But for class 1 and class 2 e-bikes, which are the most common that you'll probably see around, that get up to 20 miles per hour, those are permissible everywhere that bikes are in Virginia. So they should be included into our regional plan for active transportation, and we do get into that a little bit in the plan.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Does that help at all, Upton?
Well, just thinking in the future, though, Dan, where the e-bikes, are readily available. We saw a lot of the e-scooters and actually motorized skateboards, and not populated necessarily by young people. I observed a number of what appeared to be very professional older gentlemen and women riding the e-scooters just in traffic, and I think we need to add that to our list of the thought process as we think about alternative transportation.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The assist that you get with e-bikes in particular can open up biking to a lot of people that previously may have had issues, like with hills or just their endurance or mobility issues in general. So we can get into a lot of talking about e-bikes, and I would love to discuss those with anybody.
So I see Sarah Wiziger has her hand raised. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Barb. My question has to do generally with the creation of new spines for a regional network beyond the ones that have been proposed and constructed or partially constructed. I noticed that in the guiding principles, it talks about prioritizing the completion of regional bicycle and pedestrian networks for individuals and community health. And I take regional to be a cross between localities. And that suggests that it's not necessarily for transportation if it's for health, but the regional big ideas says create a regional active transportation arterial network. And I just wonder, but really my main question is this for transportation, like commuters across localities? And if it's limited what you have now, do you have a plan to expand that spine?
Yeah, that's
part
good.
of this,
You've
as part of
got
this.
Couple of parts to your question. And I think, maybe we need to work on the wording. It is meant to be for all purposes, all trip purposes, not just, the health part has to do with it is a benefit to be actively using some form of transportation as opposed to getting in your car to drive somewhere. So the healthy benefit is a large, that's why we're looking at the health opportunities areas where people have lower outcomes of good health in addition to the equity areas. But yes, you're right. I think, and I neglected to mention, of course, that for example, the larger regional trail system is the Virginia Capital Trail, of course, just comes to Richmond. And then our plan is acknowledging that it should go west, and there are a number of different options and they could all happen, or maybe one of them happens. We call it the James River Heritage Trail. That would go, either north or south of the river and out to the west and connect with, some vision for a 3-notch trail all the way to Charlottesville. So those bigger regional framework kinds of trails are envisioned as part of this plan. But what you're suggesting too is making sure those I call them sub-regional. They're still, there's still a lot of, we've got the East Coast Greenway of different pieces that are already through the region. How do those connect? How do they all become fall line? Are there other opportunities like in Chesterfield with Stratton Park and the connection down to Pocahontas State Park? Those are all, what are equally as important and need to tie into the bigger frame.
Well, I guess maybe I should have been more specific with examples, but I'm thinking if Richmond and Henrico wants to have a better connection out Patterson to Glenside or out Staples Mill, or is there anything in this plan that encourages that or helps I don't know, puts the finger on the scale for that, or Mechanicsville Turnpike, or places that are not attached to multi-use trails, but actually for transportation between localities as a regional amenity.
Yes, all of that. I mean, there is also a laundry list of individual projects that are like, that are bike lanes or are extensions of those sidewalks that connect across and where I'm thinking Patterson in particular, where there have been some improvements of bike lanes in the city. And I know the city and Henrico are looking further to the west, to tie in at Willow Lawn, so it can then, ultimately connect to the Pulse up on Broad Street. So there are those, and Staples Mill is a focus of Henrico, looking at really from a complete street standpoint, how can we more completely use those roadways that are now vehicular arteries and may serve transit too, but could be broadened and serve better, safer bike and pedestrian access, up to the Amtrak station, for example, at Staples Mill. All of that is very much a part of this, and all those sub investigations that the localities are doing, and some we're on the teams for to work with. So yes, they're all.
I wanted to quickly add that in our plan and also on the online web maps that they're interactive and you can play around with yourself. We have these network gaps that are represented by pink lines. So those are more so areas that we have found gaps in the current connectivity and the take into account the proposed network. And those lines have been vetted by locality staff as well. So that might be a little bit of what you're referring to as well.
Yeah. And I see just a clarification from earlier that John Easter added about McClelland's $1 million for Ettrick train station, which is really cool. With improved pedestrian and safety features. And I see Mr. Rasnick has a question.
Yes, this may be for Philip or Dan. When you introduce the e-bikes and the motorized skates, scooters.
There's scooters.
Does that not introduce another level of safety problems on the? We're talking about pedestrians in particular, for pedestrians in particular.
I can start with this, and Phil, if you want to jump in, but yeah, there's absolutely considerations. There are different types of bikes. They're still classified as bicycles, but they are generally heavier, sometimes faster. I have an e-bike as one of my bikes, and I'm still often passed by people on just road bikes. So the speed thing is not so much of an issue. There is the larger weight though. But generally, personally and professionally, I see e-bikes as something that can be car replacers, either for people in households that do not have a car or might have just one car. So if you look at it that way, e-bikes are much more safer than having cars on the road. So that's where I think we're coming from with that. So there are certainly safety considerations, but the research and the academics out there haven't really pointed to any significant decreases in safety on bike paths or even sidewalks.
Yeah.
As Dan had mentioned before, this is Phil. As Dan had mentioned before, there's different classifications, 1, 2, and 3. And 3 is still, that's that highest level, highest speed. And it's still limited at 28 miles per hour by the actual mechanism itself. The machine can't go more than 28, just by the motor and the classifications. But yeah, it's more of an equalizer. You get more people potentially able to ride, people who wouldn't want to take on some of the worst hills. So it's sort of an idea. The idea behind it is more people might be willing to bike if you've removed some of the worst impediments like hills.
Yeah, and if we're coming at this from an equity standpoint, which obviously I think we all should, it's hard to think of a more equitable form of transportation than e-bikes. They're just incredibly cheap. They
compared to a car, yeah.
Yes. Even compared to a lot of bikes, like you can get e-bikes for much cheaper now, and just the expansion of like somebody's radius that they can travel to, like jobs, community services, to schools, it's unrivaled. So it's kind of a game changer.
I am interested in Mr. Martin's question about skateboards. So I would like to check in with Virginia Capitol Trail to see what their experience has been.
I just wanted to, I just actually found out that somebody I know rides a skateboard, an electric skateboard to work. And he lives in downtown Richmond, and he works in Libby Mill and Henrico.
Wow.
And his skateboard actually goes to 35 miles per hour, which seems a little scary to me. And I know that there's not as much legislation around that as there are e-bikes. So, but that's something to consider as well.
Something to consider, and find out more about.
Hey, Barb, just FYI, I was on the Capitol Trail Monday and saw 4 of the mono boards, and they were cruising along. And we should all remember that that's one less car on the street for each one of those.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a really good discussion. I also want to be cognizant of everyone's time. do we have time with each of you to actually show you the story map? Well, I guess more of the navigation of the story map as well as some of the mapping, so you can see what resources are available.
Barb, before you get in that, I noticed that Lisa Guthrie has her hand up.
You still, I'm sorry, Lisa.
That's okay. I just put it up.
Now losing the web or the PowerPoint, I could see you.
I had to laugh when I heard about the hill because the most intimidating portion of the Capitol Trail is coming right out of the city and going up that hill to Verina. So,
exactly.
That's a game killer right there. But I wondered about the scooters. They have a sign on them in town that says "Do not ride on sidewalks," and of course people do. So I just didn't know, could scooters also be an acceptable mode on the trails? I didn't hear that addressed.
Yeah. I don't have an answer for that. Do you, Dan? Or I don't know if they're prevented from using the Capitol Trail, for example, or are they?
I don't know of any
allowable?
preventions.
Okay.
I don't know of any preventions other than the scooters probably have all those rented. They have a radius, and I think that there's a limit to how far away they can go.
Okay.
I don't know if they actually have a shutdown mechanism in them, but I think they're allowed on those trails, by the rules.
Okay, thanks.
Before I was going to show, how you can interact with us, basically our story map that goes through everything. But before, I was going to say, I know I had one other question from Amber, and I want to go back to that one. She says, random thought, do you know if Derbyshire has ever been looked into as a bike boulevard? And this is a road in Western Henrico, basically a connection between Parham and Gaskins Road. It's in the collegiate school area, so that's that big central part of the area. It's River Road bound on the south side of the neighborhood, and then Patterson to the north. So 3 really busy roads bounding the neighborhood. Derbyshire cuts right through east-west in the middle of it. The real goal with any neighborhood boulevards or bike boulevards would be to get away from the busiest street. And Franklin Street in the Fan area was an effort, the city's first effort to do a bike boulevard. And the goal really was to remove a lot of the traffic or divert a lot of the traffic from it. It didn't quite work out that way, but they did try to slow traffic and added some speed humps and so on. But the idea in that neighborhood you're describing, Amber, would be more to pick Terrytown, which is a road that's south in that neighborhood that goes east-west, or Avalon, which is north of there. They mostly make it through those neighborhoods, but it's much lower traffic volumes, lower traffic speeds. There's no stoplights in there. So again, you're trying to follow that idea of guiding people through neighborhoods with that, the lower traffic speeds and volumes, and have hopefully that east-west connection would be mimicked, but you wouldn't be trying to, Derbyshire has way too many cars, higher volumes. And then of course the houses are built right up to it. There's not much chance to widen large swaths of Derbyshire. So I hope that kind of answers what you're asking, but that's sort of the effort here with all of these. I saw your cat, Lisa. That's kind of the effort with all of these suggestions is targeting, the more dangerous, crossing Patterson, crossing Parham. How do you connect within the neighborhoods, and then at those very dangerous or high volume traffic areas, provide a safer connection across? Okay, so I hope everyone can see the draft plan here. This is when you click on bikepedrva.org, which is the main website that we've created to send people to all of our feedback. This is what you'd see, and the public review here of our draft plan, which you can see here to read the draft plan. We've been working with this. We've got over 200 comments from some of our partners in the region, from general public. If you'd please like to read the plan and make any of your own comments, the comment period is open until the 23rd. We do have information on how you could actually use the file stage document if that ends up being a hassle. But we have our survey, and obviously if there's any sort of other presentations that we can make, anybody you can suggest who might best benefit from some time with us. We've had, I don't know, maybe 20 plus different presentations we've made throughout the region. Barbara mentioned that we were in Ashland the other night, but we've been to the Hanover County Board, New Kent, Charles City Boards. We've had Spanish language in the South Side. We met with a group down there, different parks groups, RABA, which is, Richmond Area Bicycling Association, lots of different ways we've interacted, but still, plenty of time to meet with other different groups. But on this website, I just want to make sure that it's clear to everybody. Across the top here is sort of a navigation to get into different pieces of what we've put together. Some of the things that Dan and Barbara presented, this is more of the executive summary version of the process, the definitions for active transportation and all the other terms. Obviously, all of the different acronyms that are used in transportation are summarized in this. The vision, as we had discussed earlier, big ideas and on all that, but our maps is the big key area. And I know in our presentation, we've had to repeat this throughout when we've made the presentation. It's really hard to make out what we're talking about on our tiny little PowerPoint. So we've got all of the different maps available, all the different data layers available on this site. And as we were saying earlier, this is building a little slowly. All the different rivers, they are barriers, to be able to provide any sort of transportation, but even more so with biking and walking. We're not just going to have every single bridge, for example, cross the James that you're allowed to walk and bike across. So it's limited. We have information from other planning efforts that Plan RVA has led, deficient bridges and culverts within the region. Those are the little red flags. We have all the railroads and obviously the rivers, the different barriers. Like Champ likes to always mention, opportunities for rails with trail as well. So we try to identify those corridors. We have been tracking all the pedestrian injuries and deaths. As you can see, I can zoom in just a bit. This is all the different points here of pedestrian injuries. And then the red dots would be the deaths that have happened. So we've got data updated for the past 6 years in this. And the same with cyclists. Obviously there's fewer, but we're trying to track these, and we hope that our effort gets us to zero. That's really the effort here to try to reduce crashes.
Phil, if I could just add too about, we now have the VDOT study that has helped us look at a high injury network for the region, with a focus on pedestrian safety areas that need a greater degree of scrutiny to make them safer because of the degree of accidents that have occurred. So that is just out and will be in front of the board next very soon for their adoption.
Thank you, Barb.
Yeah.
So as we go through, there's just all these other layers, showing the different data that we used to inform our plan. These are almost all of this data is shared with the Connect RVA 2045 plan, our long-range transportation plan, which obviously had to inform both activity centers with cycling and pedestrian, obviously trying to have opportunities for people to walk to these areas as well. We've identified those. There's 20 different areas that were a part of that long-range transportation plan. One of the key factors for Fall Line, especially as it goes north from Lakeside to Ashland, is trying to use power lines. Using the corridor that the old Charlie line had followed, it's essentially a power line. Well, as you can see, all the purple lines on this map, there's lots of opportunities for more. And so we're just trying to mark all of these on the maps and keep track in case there are opportunities to use those corridors. Similarly, trying to connect to all the schools, parks, health facilities, and government services. You can get in and sort of dive at all these different points, but trying to improve those connections, especially with safe routes to schools, and trying to provide safe walking and biking to school for children. Again, we've tried to work very closely with GRTC and how to best enhance that transportation service, as Barb had mentioned earlier. But just there's many data points, that we use to try to inform our plan here. Well, I'm not sure. All of a sudden, I'm being kicked out of ArcGIS.
Just try cancel.
Yeah, I tried. It wasn't helping. Okay, there we go. But so all those different layers can be found if you click on the interactive regional map. And again, you can choose all the different layers yourself. You turn things off that you don't want to see. We show our current bike lane infrastructure or sidewalk infrastructure. We have future plans as well. So, but yeah, we go through a lot of different data points, different information on here. And, I was going to say, we can go through a whole lot of stuff and spend all day, but I wanted to leave any extra time if there were more questions. It looks like we had a few more pop up in the chat.
Or if anybody wanted to dive into a map and zoom in to an area, that's certainly an option depending on time.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I saw Mr. Johnson was raising his hand earlier. I don't know if you actually had a question, Mr. Johnson, or somehow. Okay.
One of my questions was on the bike path. Was there any regulations on speed and especially e-bikes?
Yeah, that same breakdown of the classifications, class 1, 2, and 3. As far as I know, all 3 are allowed on bike paths. There was an effort in Hanover County, I think, to limit, I think it was class 3 on park trails, which that's a pretty small amount of trails right now in Hanover, but would, I think, I can't remember if that ordinance actually passed, but would actually affect trolley line as well, which, there's about 4 to 5 miles in Hanover County that would be a part of fall line. But I have to check on that ordinance, but as far as I know, there's not any restrictions right now for e-bikes on paved paths and gravel paths, but single track is, for mountain bike riders, that's a whole nother discussion. And I right now think there are a lot of e-bike restrictions on single track trail, and they're not really technically counted as transportation routes, but that has more to do with funding than it does with reality. I mountain bike a lot. I use that as my transportation. So, but yeah, that's the one area of restrictions would be for single track for e-bikes.
And the reason was because I was noticing from Charles City to through Henrico into the city was I have been watching bikes traffic coming through, and
Yes.
I'm saying, was that going to impact anything?
As far as I know, there's no restrictions on the Capitol Trail for e-bikes, and I know that there's tour groups that actually, hey, we'll ride you out on an e-bike to some of the vineyards, and then we'll give you a ride home after you enjoy the vineyard. But this is planned packages for people to have e-bikes get them there. So they definitely are welcomed on the Capitol Trail. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Are there other questions? I could be here all day. This is really fun for us to talk about this. And, some of our presentations have been, like I said, we met with a Spanish language one. We're really trying to reach into some of the communities in South Richmond, for example, where, folks may not have access to vehicles and may not have, folks were really trying to talk about how do they get along that Hall Street corridor or Route 1 in areas that don't have good bus connections. And trying to get their children to school from, different housing developments down that way. It's really important for us to be able to get that feedback from them and how we can work with the city and Chesterfield in those corridors.
And I'll also mention, we met with the residents of Hollybrook up near St. Joseph's Villa. And that's 60 units of those that are differently abled. And, heard a lot, had Henrico there with us and Mr. Thornton. So it was wonderful well, not wonderful, but just it was hard to hear some of their stories of what they have to deal with, even with all the improvements that have been made by VDOT and Henrico to make crossing Brook Road or Parham and Wilkinson more safe for them. So, we've got our ears open. We're looking for more opportunities. I've been in touch with the tribal nation, the Chickahominy tribal nation, and we're hoping to, even beyond the March 23rd date, we've started dialogue with them on so many things, and now want to make sure we keep them connected on Bike Ped. So we're working on a community tribal meeting with them as well. So are there specific areas that anybody would like to zoom in on, or to see how the degree of data that is within our grasp on this website?
I was going to add, you can kind of see with the crashes involving pedestrians here. That's Whole Street Road corridor. You can see Route 1 corridor through here. Several, obviously when you get closer into the downtown area, some of the, Broad Street and so on, it's the areas where we most need to concentrate efforts to improve safety. There are obviously areas that have also a greater density, more people in these areas, more vehicles. But there's some smaller areas too that, in this Mechanicsville area, that's I think Atlee Station or Atlee Road, I should say. Some of these are, identifying, all right, what is the issue there? Is it, is there a gap we need to close for a sidewalk where, it's just an area where folks aren't allowed to be separated? Is it a lighting problem? Is it, whatever the identification, we can work with the localities to try to help. And, off of what Lisa was asking about with the funding, again, trying to look for funding sources that may help provide some federal funding that may help close those gaps. Henrico County is going through that right now. I know this group is really well versed in having Bud Vi talk about over the years all the different problems of closing sidewalk gaps and dangerous areas. But that's really Henrico's catching up on a lot of that in areas as well. And we're working with them on their comprehensive plan right now for their chapter, their bike and pedestrian chapter that they're adding to their comp plan. So they're making great strides to try to catch up in that regard.
But John Hamilton has a question. Mr. Hamilton.
Great. I want to thank you for the excellent draft in your presentation. What I wanted to ask about was the extent to which the plan could incorporate the impact of zoning upon bike planning and bike and pedestrian safety.
Yeah, thank you, John. And that is in large measure what we try to focus on in the implementation section of this plan, because zoning is key. For example, Henrico has just done a comprehensive review and revision of their zoning ordinance. And in that process has created lots of opportunities for mixed use, mixed income, denser nodes of development that will focus and create senses of community rather than, promoting further, I guess for the lack of a better term, sprawl. But those areas will be more conducive for bike ped and active transportation access within and to, and among those areas. So huge strides in recognizing, and I think that's a key too to the city's Richmond 300. That's how they're actually implementing much of the Richmond 300 plan by doing comprehensive rezonings for Scott's Addition, for example, and Monroe Ward. Chesterfield has also embarked on a comprehensive update of their zoning ordinance. So I think all of those will be building into enriching the communities in a new way. But thanks for that question. Any other? And I know I appreciate those of you who have served on our steering committee, Sarah being one that Sarah just had to sign off, Sarah Erickson. She provided
Yes.
really good input through the process.
Yeah, we've been working well with our steering committee and appreciate all that. It's been a 2-year process, like we were saying earlier, and we've had some turnover. Folks come and go in jobs in a 2-year period, and that's certainly been a case for us. But yeah, Sarah stuck with us.
Thank you, Barb, Phil, Dan.
Thank you so much.
The in-depth conversation. Those of us on the CTAC committee, the fact that we had one lead conversation today was not by accident. We have decided, to the extent possible, to focus on maybe one particular subject matter to give us on the CTAC panel more time to ask questions, to get answers, because we do represent a community and we need to be knowledgeable of some of these higher level efforts that are happening within our transportation plan. So as we move forward with meetings, we'll have more meetings with a singular focus, and we invite the conversation, the questions, because we have the responsibility then to take those answers out into the community. So thanks for all you do, Barb, Philip.
Thank you.
Dan, we appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Our next new business is a report from the CTAC Membership Committee. I announced at our last meeting that we were going to look into expanding our membership to include not only those who represented our disbanded EDAC committee, which stood for Elderly and Disabled Advisory Committee, but also the community as a whole. Lisa Guthrie, our vice chair, agreed to lead that group, and the committee's made up of Walter Johnson, Amber Lancaster, John Leonard, and Champ Burnley. So I'll turn it over now to Lisa to give us a brief report from that committee. Lisa? Lisa, you're muted.
I got it. Thanks. Well, thank you for that. And we had a good first meeting this morning. Give you a little background information. Back in 2019, the TPO had decided that the EDAC, which was for the work group for elderly and disabled, was not really active and wanted to merge their representation and their constituency in with CTAC. And the bylaws were changed to do that. I think it was everyone's intention that that would be done immediately after that, but then came COVID and other delays. So Upton and I and Ken Lance really focused on that starting in July and with this new year. And we have now formed this committee that Upton just referenced that is going to be looking at some good candidates to fill the 5 additional seats that we have available to us on CTAC, according to our operations guidelines. So anyway, this morning we met, we talked about different organizations, who might be bringing a different focus, representing different constituents to broaden our outreach, to bring more voices into shaping transportation for the region. So we've mentioned everything from the groups that used to be on EDAC, such as Senior Connections, AARP, resources for independent living, and others that had been involved, plus perhaps some additional individuals. Our interest is to have more active participation. So we want organizations to submit applications if they think that they can have an individual participate on a regular basis and an alternate, so that they are actually fulfilling their role. And so Ken is going to send out some letters to some organizations that we've identified, and to see if they have an interest, and then we will follow up with them in the next month or so to try to arrive at the best candidates for those 5 slots. So with luck, we would have these new organizations / individuals join us at our July meeting. So that's, we are already on the path of accomplishing that.
Thank you, Lisa. Any comments in regards to the direction this committee is going to go to? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is future meeting topics. Page 12 of the packet that was sent to you designates what our future meeting subject matter will be, and to just reiterate that Ken has done an excellent job of of matching subject matter to give us more opportunity to be focused on certain things. May is going to be Virginia Transit Equity and GRTC system update. July, we're thinking about July meeting. In addition to introducing 5 new members, we will also be talking about transportation funding. We talked a little bit about that through our questions in several different subject matter today. But we thought that this would be another subject matter that would really qualify for a workshop. So that entire meeting will be talking about where are our transportation needs funded, and who has the approval of the different funding. And then in September, where the plan is talk about Greater Washington Partnership, the impact on transportation investments. I invite any of us on the panel to communicate to either myself or Ken in regards to subject matter that you would like to have discussed in future meetings. Time now is to our CTAC members. Any comments, any hot buttons that you would like to bring to the attention of all the committee? Now's your time. Unusually quiet group of people this afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, this is Charles Rasnick. I can't find my hand to raise it. On the transportation funding workshop, I would suggest that we expand that, the time that we have for that, because that's a big subject. I spent a major part of my career doing transportation funding, and there are some things that we could bring in through the federal as well as state representatives and DRPT, both DRPT and VDOT, to help us better understand the funding process. There's so many different sources of funds that go into the big pot that the Commonwealth Transportation Board has available to them, that to understand it all, to get a better understanding of all of it, I would suggest that we expand that maybe by going from 10 o'clock and then break for lunch and then have the meeting. Anyway, just a suggestion.
Thank you, Charles. At least, if in order to cover it, give it the time that it deserves, It may be that we would, instead of broadening one day, because I know that we're all busy, or those of us who aren't returned and aren't retired and don't have anything else to do, we may have two different meetings, two different workshops. One may be local funding and one may be federal or non-local funding, something like that. I see that Ken is taking a lot of notes but great suggestion, Charles, and I think you're right. It's a big subject. Okay. Any other CTAC member comments? Here, seeing none. Next meeting will be May the 19th. Hopefully, I don't know. I'm making this comment just on my own. Hopefully, our next meeting may be a hybrid meeting. I would hope that it would be, because I miss being in company with all of you. It's nice seeing your shiny faces, but I think we all need to get dressed up and go out every once in a while. So this might be a good opportunity, and I would pray that that would happen to all of us. But in the meantime, be safe, be careful, and thank you for your participation and your comments. Have a good day. See you guys.